Well. Hello, and welcome to episode 56. My mic's all out of place there. Welcome to episode 56 of Brews Less Traveled, the podcast exploring the best uncharted craft beer scenes across the U.S. I'm your host, Brian, and I'm happy to welcome back my co-host for this month featuring Missoula, MC. How's it going, MC?
Hey, Brian. I'm good. I'm great. I'm excited to be back. Been a long week already, even though it's Wednesday. So
3 days.
Ready. Yep. Ready to have a couple of beers. Yeah. How about you? How's it going?
Going well. Also been a long week.
Well, I should say before we get into things, happy belated Father's Day as well.
Well, thank you.
How was your Father's Day? How's your week
much.
been?
It was nice. Weather kind of cooled down a little bit. It was still warm, but it was comfortable. My parents had a family over for dinner on Father's Day. We ate smoked meats and German potato salad, and my grandparents were there, and my aunts and uncles were there. It was a great time to hang out.
Awesome.
My daughter got to run around in their yard and have a good time, and yeah, we drank beer and hang out in the side yard, and it was great. It was wonderful. Couldn't ask for more.
Very good. Very good.
How has your week been, other than the length of it, the perceived length of it?
I keep getting screwed up. Last night I thought I missed the podcast. I was just convinced that it was not Tuesday. So that's just about how my whole week has been going. I'm here. I showed up on time even, so going okay. We're just kind of settling into like the dog days of summer routine around here. We've been, not going outside for a walk with the dog until like 8:45 p.m. Last night was the summer solstice, so we went on a long summer solstice walk. Just kind of slowing down, settling into summer. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love a nice summer walk.
Yeah.
I would feel remiss. This is basically a Pittsburgh podcast. This podcast minors in Pittsburgh. So I would feel remiss if I didn't mention the fact that today is the first day of Homebrew Con here in my hometown of Pittsburgh. So I've already seen the hustle and bustle around the convention center. I helped out with some awesome experiences that we're providing. Our sister company, City Brew Tours, is providing for the homebrew fanatics and beer fans in the Steel City this week, and I'm excited to see some of my coworkers who are also in town. Can't wait for the rest of the week. Love a convention. Love seeing my coworkers. So
yeah. I don't know much about Homebrew Con. Like what all goes on there? What do people like? Is it educational? Is it marketing? What are people up to?
So Homebrew Con is the hobby equivalent of the Craft Brewers Conference. It's put on by the Homebrewers Association of America, which is the homebrewer arm of the Brewers Association. So very similar to the Craft Brewers Conference, obviously not as industry focused because it's not industry people there, but there's educational seminars, there's an expo for people to walk through, and there's just a bunch of activities going on around town focused on beer education, and also just about the beer community and people getting together and celebrating this common interest in this amazing hobby that is homebrewing. So
cool. Do you get to drink any homebrew?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, there's a big club night on Friday. Our good friend, we'll call him friend of the pod, Clayton, City Brew Tours beer guide, is going to be pouring at the club night on Friday. So they showcase a bunch of local home brewers. And on top of that, there's events at all the local breweries here. 11th Hour's hosting one, Hop Farm's hosting one, Grist House right down the street from me is hosting one. And it's just lots of great people, good beer, and good times. It's I'm excited. And they also say that HomebrewCon is the testing ground for CBC. So hopefully a couple years from now, maybe we'll see a CBC come to the Steel City.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm a little jealous. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. And
Oh,
I'll tell you what else I'm very excited for. Tonight's episode, we're featuring another great brewery from the wonderful city of Missoula, Montana. Today, it's Imagine Nation Brewing Company, and we'll be featuring their. I hope I should ask Robert the name of this beer, how to pronounce it properly, but Lupujus 7. We'll get
that's
clarification on that.
that's what I was going with in my head.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
juicy IPA, I was
Lu-
thinking.
Lupulin, Lupujus.
Loopy
Again, we'll get
juice.
clarification on that.
We'll get confirmation.
This beer right here, as well as their Synchronic Beats Double IPA, 2 batches of beer that were actually brewed to especially be featured in this box showcasing the city of Missoula.
And Brian, you already mentioned him, but we're going to be joined by one of the founders of the brewery, Robert Rivers.
Yep, that's right. And given that we've got 2 great beers and a lot to discuss with our guests, let's get right to it tonight. Please join us in welcoming our guest, the co-founder of Imagine Nation, Robert Rivers.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the time and the interest in the beers and the brewery. And I'm really looking forward to talking with both of you for the next hour.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for joining us. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, but let's get started with the aforementioned Lupujus 7.
Uh-huh.
Did I get that right? Can you tell us more about the beer?
Yeah, sure. We pronounce it Lupujus. It's the, as we say, it is a juicy kind of New England style IPA, and it's the juice of the Humulus lupulus, the taxonomy for hops. So it doesn't really matter how you pronounce it, but we get a lot of people that come into the brewery and ask for lupus juice. And I find that a bit odd that they would A, ask for that, and B, think that we would name a beer after a chronic disease. So it is pronounced Lupujus. It was the state's first New England style IPA. We started brewing about 5 years ago after some friends of ours brought us a can of Heady Topper, which I think you could probably say is maybe one of the iconic beers of the style and really that created the style.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a game changer for us. The first time we had Heady Topper, and so yeah, Lupujus 7 is the state's first New England style IPA.
Nice, and it is a
Cheers
very
to that.
yes. Cheers. Description says with over 6 pounds per barrel of Strata Simcoe T90 /cryo and Mosaic T90 /cryo. That's a lot of hops, and I think we should explain for the folks at home what the difference is between those different types of hops in terms of the T90 and the cryo.
Yeah, sure. T90 hops, as the name says, they're 90% lupulin, whereas cryo hops are 100% lupulin. And so there's no vegetal matter in the cryo hops, which really gives a nice pop to the beers. It's really clean. You don't get any vegetal matter in the beer. And it really allows the best of the hops to come through, especially when you use it in the whirlpool and dry hopping. You really pull the best out of those hops.
I'm definitely getting some of that Mosaic. It's not so acidic like that Mosaic. I feel like that little bit of fruitiness that you get in that Mosaic is really balancing the Citra really well. I like it a lot. Can't wait for it to warm up a little bit. Mine's a little cold. I think those hops are really going to come out.
Good thing it's summer. Your glass will warm up a little bit faster.
It'll take no time here in Missouri. Yeah. So Imagine Nation was founded with a special mission. Can you tell us about that? And can you tell us about the inception of the brewery?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and our background is in international humanitarian work. My wife is a trauma psychologist, and I'm a peace building specialist. And so really after working in conflict zones for many years, we wanted to take a little break from the front lines to decompress, heal a little bit. And so we started to really think about different things that we want to do with our lives. And both of us, before even meeting, had a desire to set up at some point a retreat or educational center. But we knew that doing so would be really difficult to fund it financially. So we started to think about businesses that we could combine with an educational center to be able to fund a lot of the projects that we were doing. And so my wife is from Brazil. And if you've ever been to Brazil, the Brazilians are wonderful at many things, but they, I think, are the best human connectors in the world. To watch the way they connect is an art form. And I think we were in Brazil watching everybody connect over beer. This was a decade ago. And we thought, why not do a brewery? Breweries already indirectly connect people, but we could take a model that was already doing it indirectly and give it a specific intention. And so we combined Imagine Nation the brewery with the Center for Community Transformation, which is a room in the brewery where we would host events. And by combining these, we created what we think to be the country's first combination of a brewery and a Center for Community Transformation.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it has been.
And just some stats in that regard. I believe you've hosted over 4,000 events for local community organizations through your years being open there, which is a very impressive number.
Yeah, before COVID, there were times where in a week we'd host, up to 25 different events during the week. And so, you'd have a dialogue happening in the tap room, with panelists speaking about issues that are affecting everybody, another event going on in the center, and then out in the patio, there could be one or two other things happening. And so it really became a nexus for social change in a way, and really a saucepan for the locals to add their special sauce to of social change, environmental change, and really just connecting over, like I said, a lot of the issues that are affecting all of us right now.
Yeah, totally. And Brian mentioned those community events. If you guys look on the side of your cans, they have a bunch of stats about donations, about their community events, just a little glimpse into what they're doing for the community there in Imagine Nation. So that's a really cool thing to have on your cans, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the beer is important. That's something that we did find, that without good beer, you can't make the educational center work. And so, we put a lot of energy and resources into the beer to try and create the best beer we possibly can. But I think on the cans, we also tried to say that this is more than just beer.
I think the cans are a very good representation of that balance between the community center and what you do for your local community, as well as being a representation of a fun beer, a fun, well-made beer.
Yeah.
And you don't just do good IPAs. I had an excellent ESB when I was there, so you do the classics very well additionally too.
Yeah, I think it's I feel like we've been lucky to be able to introduce a lot of the contemporary styles to the state, but there's only so many pastry sours you can sit and drink back to back, and sometimes you want a beer that just tastes like beer. And so I think we do try to have a broad range to meet the different demands of patrons. And for those who just want a beer, they can get a beer. And if they want to kind of push the limits, then they can push the limits as well.
That's great. After my wonderful visit to the brewery where we got a chance to talk and walk through the space, I was waiting outside for my Uber, and I took notice of the outside, the exterior of the building. And there's a number of figures painted on the outside of the building. Who are some of those people that are painted on the outside of the building, and what do they mean to the brand of Imagine Nation?
Sure. I think on the outside, I'm not sure how many we have exactly. I'd have to go out and actually count, but I think it's close to 25 different change makers from the world painted on the building outside. And so when you walk in, you walk in between Frida Kahlo and Dr. King. There's Cesar Chavez out there, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Harvey Milk, Rosa Parks. I think in some ways, what our hope is that when people see that and they walk in, it sets the tone for their visit. In some ways, I feel like what we've tried to do with the brewery is really just continue the legacy of many of these change makers and set up a space where the local community can hopefully try to pick up that mantle, if you will, and do what they can, whether it's just in Missoula or beyond, to try and I guess push the needle in a bit more positive direction in a way that's going to affect all of us in a constructive way.
And here's a good look at that outside. Well, there's a Toyota parked there too, but good look at the outside of Imagination there.
Very cool. Awesome. Robert, we've heard a lot about your background not related to beer. I'd love to hear, what's the beer that got you into craft beer?
Well, once we decided that we wanted to do a brewery, I think it's slightly different from the way most people, I guess, would set up a brewery, because they think about beer first. And for us, it was social change and the Center for Community Transformation. So it was a bit of a cart before the horse. So once we made that decision, we decided that we obviously needed to learn how to make beer. And lucky for us, I think a lot of our international contracts would take us through Europe on the way to the Middle East or Africa or South Asia. And so in some ways, for really a span of 3 or 4 years while doing these visits, we got to taste a lot of the most famous beers in the world at the source. And I think in some ways that beer education of learning what styles in some ways should be at their very best, was really an inspiration. It helped us develop a palate so that we could understand, what we were striving for. And I guess if I could say a beer, honestly, one of my favorite beers in the world is if you go to Cork City in Southern Ireland, they have the Southern Irish version of Guinness, which is called Beamish. And, if you go in there in the winter and it's pissing rain outside and it's dark, and you go into a pub and you see an Irish session playing in the corner and there's a fire in the fireplace and you sit down and have a Beamish, there are fewer beer experiences that I've found that can rival that. And so it's a fairly mass-produced beer, but man, they do a good job with it.
And the experience makes it everything. You really surprised me there when you said you were in Ireland when I asked about your, the best craft beers. Where is he going with this? But there, I totally agree. The beer is only part of, the whole drinking experience. So that's really cool. And you're really lucky to have gotten to try so many, beautifully created beers from the source. Like you said, that's a great way to learn.
Yeah. And, I think for us, the best part too, is in many of these countries, we visit friends who are also people that are involved in the humanitarian world. And so what I like to tell people oftentimes is, they'll sit down and like, I want to talk to you about this beer. And I'll look at somebody and say, I want to talk to you about something more important.
Yeah.
And I say, you know what, I'll talk to you about beer as much as you want. I'm so happy you're passionate about it. But just as long as we can make the leap to something that's going to get us a little bit more into our humanity. And I think that's how I've always looked at beer, is it's a precursor. Like it's not the destination. It's something to lubricate the conversation and start the connection. And I found that in the Middle East, even with like hookah or, shisha, as they call it in the Middle East, where it's something that people are sharing, but they're not sitting there talking about the shisha that they're smoking together. They're talking about life and their families and how conflict is affecting them. But they're sharing something physical that I think really helps bind people together. And I've just seen in so many instances where it really can help deepen the conversation. I think open up a little bit more vulnerability and create magic. And, so I think craft beer absolutely can be magic, but it's what we do with it, and I think even the best beer in the world, in the end of the day, it is still a beer. But if we can do something positive with that, then everything, the beer and everything around it can become magical.
Wow. Amazing. I just got chills. I love all of that.
It's like, if you look back at history too, the stories that are fun to hear about the history of the beer are the things that happen around the beer, the things that the beer was a conduit for or a catalyst for. Beer has always been kind of central to community gatherings in the historical sense. And I mean, even just in our very country here, the American Revolution was founded in taverns and pubs over pints, and they weren't talking about the beer. It was the conduit to the discussion.
Yeah, exactly. People know the stories of the founding fathers sitting at the Green Dragon and concocting a plan for revolution, but nobody knows what beer they were drinking, right? But that the human beings were there and they were connecting over it. And I totally agree with you. And I think the best stories that will be written about beer won't actually be about the beer. It'll be about what we do with it.
Yep. So speaking of beer, I think it's a good time to get into our second beer here. What could you tell us about? Yeah, I realize that now. Like looking at the script that we're on a show that I wrote out here.
Oh no, I
This
meant
is
your
way too
capacity for
early
putting
to get
down a
into this
pint.
beer.
Oh, mine is not gone, but no
MC,
judgments if anybody's are.
We'll just move into the second one here. We'll let's promote a safe consumption of double fisting these beers, and
Yes.
let's move into our double IPA here, Synchronic Beats. This actually has
Yeah.
some fruit in it, right?
Yeah, I think this was fruited with passion fruit. And it's a beer that we did in collaboration with the World Affairs Council, which is an organization in Montana that brings kids from rural and bigger cities in Montana, if you could call any of them bigger. But it brings kids together basically to have competitions about their knowledge about the world. And they do an incredible job of educating youth in the state about global affairs and about what's happening in the world around them. And so we brewed this beer for them, but also specifically, we brewed as a fundraiser for relief for Ukraine. And so as part of this beer, we raised $12,000 in the night at the brewery towards the beginning of the war to send to an organization that was providing food and supplies for refugees as they cross borders, especially into Poland.
Wow. There has never been a moment on the podcast that I've wanted to say cheers to something more than that. So cheers. That's
Cheers.
really amazing. One night, $12,000 in one night.
And it was really unbelievable. We had members from both the Russian community and the Ukrainian community who are here in Missoula get up and talk about how the war was affecting them. And it was beautiful to see how balanced it was. And to see human beings, behind conflict and behind everything that you read in the news, but to see human beings who were affected by the war, both the Ukrainians who had families who were afflicted because of the conflict, but also to see the Russians get up and to say, this is a shame. And I said, and what's hard for this is because people think that I'm Russian, they think that I'm for this, but a large amount of people in Russia are not for this invasion. And so it was really wonderful to see human beings get up there and tell their human story, and then at the end of it, embrace each other. Very hopeful to see that on mass scales, you can look at destruction and devastation and death. But when you get down to the human connection that's in it, for the Ukrainians and the Russians to look at each other and say, we're not that different, and none of us want what's happening here. And in some ways, they're united against, I think, part the opposition to the war, but also what they all hope for their own families and for their own futures in their countries. But like I said, you can't make a bad beer and try and bring people together. So we really tried to go all out with this one. It is a double dry hopped double IPA. This is heavily hopped. I think this is 8 pounds per barrel. And then oftentimes we do like to add fruit sometimes to the IPAs, but I always liked how the Belgian brewers would say that if you could name what was in the beer, then there's too much of it in the beer. But really, I think what I found is the most beautiful beers are ones of balance. It's not ones that are so out of control that you're like, whoa, there's the coconut. Or it's like, wow, I've never tasted marshmallow in a beer. It's more of like, what did you say is in here? Wow, like that really plays well together. And so really, we tried to take a hop combination that was very passion fruit forward when you bring them together, and then use the fruit really just to give the hops a bit of a boost. And so if you didn't know that passion fruit was in there, there might not, you might not say, oh, this has a ton of fruit in it. It's really, I think hop growers take a lot of time and energy creating the cones that we put in beer. And so I don't like to usurp that. I like to use the fruit in some ways just to give it a boost so you can really highlight what's happening in Yakima, or happening in Oregon, or happening in New Zealand or Australia. I think there's incredible hops out there right now, and fruit has its place, but I think is a supporting role.
Yeah, that's the first thing. Sorry, MC.
Nope, go ahead.
The first thing that I thought was like, there's passion fruit in here. It just blends so well into that hop character. And also, this is a double IPA. This is not true, it's a double IPA.
Yeah, it's going down a little easier than that. Yeah, I feel like the fruit is like just kind of accentuating like that little hot bite that you get at the end. You get like a little acidity kick, and it just finishes like so well. It complements the hops very, very well. I agree.
Yeah, and passion fruit does that. It's kind of a tart fruit. There is some acidity in passion fruit, which, especially if you're sweltering in Missouri, that little hint of acidity is pretty refreshing.
Yeah, we're drinking Crispy Boys right now for sure. But I think that this could fall under that category almost, because that hot bite at the end really, really crisps it up. It's got a nice mouthfeel and a nice crisp finish. So yeah, I'm really liking it. So
cool.
Real quick for the
go
listeners at home, Strata Galaxy and Mosaic in this one, also using the Mosaic T90 and Cryo hop varietal combination here. So seems like lots of same tactics. Sorry, just wanted to put that out there.
Yep, worth mentioning.
Let's take a beer break and talk about barley farming. In 2021, Montana was the second largest producer of barley in the United States, producing 23.7 million bushels. And over 60% of the barley grown in Montana is barley that gets malted. Malting is the process of steeping, germinating, and kilning grains to unlock sugars, proteins, and starches found in the seed. This is a necessary process for producing the sugars the beer yeast will eventually use to create alcohol during fermentation. Sadly, because of drought and the far-reaching effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, barley production took a massive hit in 2021, with Montana farmers producing 20 million fewer bushels than 2020. Thankfully, the majority of malted barley is used in beer production, and as we know on this show, the craft beer industry is seeing a bounce back after the pandemic and will most certainly play a vital role in sustaining one of America's most important industries, agriculture. Now let's get back to the show.
So it does not sound like Imagine Nation is the average brewery. You guys have so many cool things going on. It sounds like a really special place. But I wonder, what role do you see, the average craft brewery playing in their community?
Yeah. Well, as you might imagine, I have strong feelings about this. I think honestly, I think that, I would say that my wife and I are artists, and she would say she's a healer. I would say probably neither of us would say that we're really very good business people. In fact, and I even go as far as to say we're terrible capitalists. And I think you got to keep the doors open and take care of the bottom line and take care of your staff and your community. But I because there is kind of an inherent connectivity involved in the product. Like we're not buying baby wipes here, right? This is something that people share and they connect over. I think that there's incredible power in the product. And I think there's a lot of unactualized power in the product. And I think that what we have found over the years is by being able to do more than just beer. I think for a while our tagline was Beyond Beer. That not only can you, I think, transform some of the unactualized power into generating connection in your local community, but it also, I mean, it does help financially too. If you have 4,000 events, that also does bring people in the door. The thing I always say to brewery owners when they ask, like, how can we do this? I'll oftentimes ask them, do you actually want to do this? Or is this a marketing scheme? Because, community sells, connection sells, but inauthenticity breaks that in a hurry, and people sniff that out pretty quickly. And so I oftentimes ask people, like, do some soul searching and see, do you actually want to play kind of a constructive, pivotal role in your community? And for the positives, to be able to know so many wonderful people in your community, all the people that are doing good things. The shadow side is there is blowback oftentimes too. I mean, we live in an incredibly polarized society, and blowback isn't just, from the extreme. I mean, from one extreme, it's both extremes. I feel like in some ways we're viewed. I've heard people refer to us as the communist brewery. And I said, well,
Wow.
if doing good things for your community makes you a communist, I guess I am. I mean, if that's the word, if that's the word you want to use. But there's also times when, it's like, we won't take as strong of stances if it means taking stances against people. I think that we always try to take constructive stances. I remember Gandhi always saying that it's not so much like it's not so much the combative programs that are going to make a difference in your society. It's the constructive ones. It's like, what are the things that people can connect on? Where are the joint projects? What can people work on that in some ways is going to have a bettering effect on everybody in your community? That's where you can make change. And so I think there are times people say, you need to denounce this or you need to denounce that, and our response is often, if we do that, we'll be doing that 50 times a day, because there's plenty of things to denounce in our society, but that doesn't necessarily, it just creates more noise. I'm not saying that the people who denounce have no place in society. Absolutely not. I think that you have to have people who are working against oppression and racism and misogyny and all these forces that are definitely at play in our society. But I think because beer is a connector, it inherently brings people together. I think the question for breweries to ask themselves is, how can we enhance that role in our society? And what we found is, like I referred to the brewery as kind of a saucepan, and that's really what I think of it. In some ways, a saucepan is just a pan, but it's the people who come in and the people who run the programs. That's what brings life and soul into a place. But we really have a habit of almost never saying no to people. If they come with an idea, we'll say, all right, we like it. How can we work with you to maximize your impact on that? And I think what we've tried to do is really go beyond the pint night paradigm, where, you have an organization that sits in the corner at a table and nobody engages with them, but $1 of every beer goes to that organization. That's fine in some ways, but oftentimes the organizations will say, great, this was awesome. We have enough money to buy toilet paper for the organization this week. It's not really making a big difference. But I think what we really try to do is find ways where the community can interface with others to get the word out about what they're doing, about what programs they're actually running, and about how they're making a difference in the community. And so we really try to highlight them, whether it's their work or presentations, or they got a workshop or they give a talk. And during COVID, because we couldn't bring people together, we started collaborating with a lot of local organizations to have them design labels for cans. And we did collaborations with them. So then the cans that were going out into the community could highlight the work of these organizations. And so I think there's lots of ways that you can do that. But I would just say, make sure you authentically want to play that role. Yeah, I guess those would be some of my thoughts, but I think that craft breweries can actually play a much greater role than they currently are, especially if we're approaching 10,000 breweries in the country. I mean, there's power there. And I think that if all those breweries can leverage that power in their own communities, then craft beer is making a difference.
Yeah, you said so much. There's so many things I want to respond to with that. Somebody in the chat mentioned the slogan on the side of the can. We are because of each other. And I feel like that's a wonderful message, number one. And I feel like people could live that very positive message if they just simply looked for the things that connected each other rather than what divides them. And it seems like that's the very approach that you're taking with the, for lack of a better word, stances that you're taking with issues.
Yeah, I can't claim that as our own. That is actually the philosophy of the Bantu people of East and Southern Africa, and it's called Ubuntu for people who might not know. But Ubuntu means we are because of each other. I am who I am because you are who you are. And I was first taught that from a dear friend of mine who's from Uganda, who's the head of programs for Oxfam for the.
Oh no.
Oh, did I drop out?
You dropped out like right towards the beginning of your answer.
We got you now, though.
We had you now. Frozen.
Oh, nuts.
Nuts.
We'll blame that on Montana. This is still the Wild West for internet connectivity.
Hell's Gate for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not sure where I dropped out, but we can talk about something different if it's too disjunctive.
Honestly,
Well, I
MC,
was
do you
just gonna
remember?
say I'd like to hear what you were talking about. You were talking about Ubuntu.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear what we missed.
Well, I just said that Brian, you're absolutely right. That in some ways that we are because of each other is the guiding philosophy for the brewery, and in some ways, it's what we always go back to. You know, when we're making decisions, whether it's my wife and I making decisions for the company, or how we talk and work with our staff, or how we work with the community, like, is what we're going to do, is it going to lead where we are because of each other is enhanced in our community, or is it going to start to detract away from that energy? And so you're right. It's very much a living philosophy of the brewery.
And I think the other thing you were explaining is where you originally heard that phrase. You said it originated from Africa.
Yeah, from a Ugandan colleague of mine who is the head of programs for Oxfam International for the entire African continent. He's an incredible human being. But in grad school, when I was young and in a formative place, that message got through. He talked to me about Ubuntu, and it stuck.
Wonderful. So I think you and I talked about this when we met at the brewery, but you've talked about you and your wife's travels throughout the world, and you mentioned that she is from Brazil, but ultimately, what led you to Missoula? Like, why open a brewery in Missoula?
Sure. Well, no matter what depending on what you've heard about humanitarian work, it doesn't exactly fill the bank account, at least not to the extent that you need to start a brewery. Breweries are not exactly free to start. And I'm from Helena, Montana originally.
Okay.
So we were thinking about either doing it in Brazil, where my wife is from, or in the U.S. And I think that I felt a draw to come back to the U.S. after being outside for 15 years, and to working with, I guess, my own people. I look at all people that way, but I feel like I wanted to work within my own community on the issues that were really, I guess, in a lot of ways now plaguing the people from where I'm from. And so we decided to do Missoula because it's a bit of an intellectual and cultural hotbed in Montana. It's where the university is. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of good actions. There's a lot of good things that were already happening here. So we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. And we didn't come here saying, we're here to teach you, fill in the blank. It was more of to really talk to people and say, what's important to you? What's going on here? What are the issues that you feel like need to be addressed? And then we tried to really cater the space to be able to fulfill the needs of the people that were already here. And I think, going back to what craft breweries can do, I think that in some ways that's the best way to start, is like, what are the actual needs in your community? That's what's relevant to people. That's what people are going to emotionally connect with. And so, before we started the brewery, we had to raise a bunch of money. And we knew that the only place we could probably do that was either where I'm from or where Fernanda, my wife, is from. And so, in good peace building form, we went out and we met everybody that has a stake in this community, and we presented the idea and we said, what do you think about this? And most people were like, oh, I think that sounds amazing. And said, okay, well, what's important to you? What would you like to see highlighted in that space? And so we really did try to build the vision off of the desires and the hopes of our local community. And really, I'm really happy that we did. I'm happy that we've been in Missoula for 10 years. It really has been a gift to be back here. And honestly, I think the greatest gift from doing this, I think people say like, wow, you've put out 300 different beers in 7 years. And it's like, yep, we have done that, but more so, we got to connect with every single wonderful person in this community. And then that's I think especially in an age of isolation, especially with COVID, I mean, all of us, I think, are probably still dealing with trauma that we haven't even unmasked yet, because we were so isolated for 2 years. we got to be able to connect with every wonderful person doing good work in this community. And so I feel like, is Missoula home to me? I don't think so. But the feeling that I have from the connections of the people who are here, that feels like home to me. And so, yeah, it really has been a great gift to be here.
Wow, that's great. And, kind of piggybacking off of you opening a brewery in Missoula is some big news that came this week from Imagine Nation. You actually sold the brewery, is that right?
And we did.
Yeah.
We did. I think for the last couple of years, my wife and I really started to feel the drop back to humanitarian work. In some ways, I think we have the business we realized that we had the business in a place where we built the strong foundation. We have buy-in from the local community. We built a reputation for the quality of our beer, especially regionally, and we've even, got some national acclaim for it. But honestly, it's been a humbling thing to reach a point where you realize that in some ways we were the key ingredients to making this happen, but at this point we're the key obstacles from making it what it can be. And so I think we wanted to find the right people who have a similar value system, who have similar commitment to the community, but also have the capacity to take the brand and actually make it something bigger than just a tap house in Missoula or, special can releases around the state and the region. And so, after 6 months, we found the perfect people. They're a local couple. The woman started a school here for kids that didn't quite fit into the public school system. She's got a doctorate in education with a focus on community building. And the husband owns a very small brewery here that he's going to now scale up, and he's going to produce Imagination beer on a bigger level to get the message that you see on that can in front of more people. And so, yeah, we feel very fortunate that their names are Tim and Annie Graham. We're very fortunate that we've crossed paths with them and that we were able to find the perfect people to, I think, take Imagination into the future.
They do really seem like the perfect perfect people to choose. That's awesome. I'm really excited to find out what comes next.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is something that has been in the works for some time, the entire time that we've been working with Imagination, Brewvana and Imagination to put this box together. And I can't say how happy I am that you found the right people to take this brand, this very, very special brand, to its next stage of life. And I would love to talk more about your day jobs and what you're returning to. So where are you and your wife hoping to make an impact by going back to your humanitarian work?
Well, there are organizations that we've worked with in the past, whether it's, in the realms of trauma healing or peace building and civilian peacekeeping, that I think that the plan is, I think, to move back to Europe, because a lot of the places where a lot of this work is happening is in the Middle East, in Africa, and different parts of Asia. And none of those places are very close to Montana. And I think
they're not.
In October, I flew to Erbil in northern Iraq to do some work with an organization called Nonviolent Peace Force. And I think it took 48 hours to get there with layovers. And that's not very great for the budget of an organization, nor is it great to show up and have, 2 weeks of really intensive work after making 9 time zone changes in 48 hours of travel. So I think we're gonna move to the other side of the pond so that we're a little bit closer to many of these places. And really, in some ways, rejoin a lot of the community of people that we have over there who have been doing this work for, all these 10 years that we've been doing the brewery. They've continued doing a lot of this work. And so we were really excited to rejoin many of these friends, but also, I think, get back into this work that really feeds us. And it just feels that with the state of the world right now, like I said before, not people that have, I guess, our skill set. I guess there's needs for that transcend Missoula, Montana. And I think it's time to rejoin the world and get back out there.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. And so we've heard, a lot about what your brewery does, has a huge impact, it sounds like. And so in your mind, what legacy do you hope that your brewery leaves in Missoula?
A couple of weeks ago, the International Steering Committee for the Master Brewers Association of the Americas asked for us to talk to them, and we did a Zoom call just like this, talked to folks from all over the country, and they basically asked us many of the same questions that you are. And at the end of it, one of the women said, "I hope that the future of craft beer is that every craft brewery is doing what you're doing in Missoula, Montana." And so to say what legacy. The peace theorist Kenneth Boulding said, "If it exists, it's possible." And I think when we started the brewery, it was unbelievable how many people, in a way, we were met with loads of support and love and admiration and care. We were also met with a ton of people who literally said in words, "You can't do good things and combine that with alcohol." And I think over 7 years, we've proven those people wrong, that it is possible. And so my hope would be, honestly, if there is a legacy from this, that it actually does go beyond Missoula. I think I'm not worried about the legacy in Missoula. That will continue, especially with the new owners. But my hope is the legacy that inherent power of connectivity of craft beer that we talked about before, that more breweries around the country can look at this and say, "You know what, I've always wanted to do that, but it seems scary, or it seems like it's impossible, or it can't work." And I think for me, my hope is that the legacy of Imagination is that it is possible.
That's so cool. I can't wait to see, just what she said, more and more, that all breweries do the work that you all are doing. I can't wait to see just even more communities, being positively impacted by their breweries.
Sure. Yeah, maybe that's the craft beer renaissance version 2.0, right? The first renaissance was craft beer exists again, right? Mm-hmm. And now, so we've moved past that first stage of the renaissance, and maybe hopefully the second stage is, and now look what craft beer can do for people's communities.
So cool.
Anecdotally, I have seen that in my local scene here in Pittsburgh. We have a pretty well thriving scene. I think we're up to 55 breweries in the greater Pittsburgh area.
Wow.
And recently, I have to give a huge shout out to Trace Brewing, which has opened within the last year and a half here. Right off the bat, made solid beer. That's the barrier for entry now, is you got to make good beer. Mm-hmm. And every night they're having some kind of event, whether it's a party or they're hosting a community organization or they're doing bingo, but they're doing something, and it's all centered around their local neighborhood and creating a place where the local neighborhood could gather. They also sell coffee, so they're open from 8 to 10, so you can just get your coffee and just stay there all day.
Right.
That's a different thing, but I think we're going to see that because, like I said, the barrier for entry is good beer. Look, the secret's out. Here's how you make good beer. It's scientific. You have to focus on these certain things, but everybody knows how to do it now. And there's a lot of people doing it. So what other role are you going to play in this market that is going to become saturated, that has breweries scattered all throughout the country to the point where 80% of adults of drinking age live under 10 miles from a brewery? What are you going to do that's going to make an impact and be something other than just another place that makes beer?
Right.
It's only logical that the industry goes there. I just hope that, to me, it's only logical, and I think to the people here it's only logical, but I hope the rest of the industry recognizes that and starts to see that the beer is a conduit for connection and community, and is not just this thing that we drink to have fun and get intoxicated. That's all great, but it's the discussions and experiences that happen around this beverage that really make it special. So
yeah, and like you're saying, Brian, it's you could probably pin, like you could point to any place on the map in the country, and there's probably at least one person that's doing something constructive and positive. And perhaps as things I think get more challenging in the future, which I think is inevitable, I think the question will be, what more can we do? And I think that if we have 10,000 breweries who are asking that question, I think that like I said, I think that we can start moving that needle in a much more positive direction together. And ultimately, what I always remind myself is, it doesn't matter what people's value structures are or their political positions, but ultimately human beings have core common needs, all of us, right? And then a lot of it is some of that sense of belonging and a sense of connection. It doesn't matter where you fall on spectrums, that really at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging. And everybody wants, I think, to feel that what they're doing is good, that their life matters, right? I mean, I think there's very few people that go through a day and say, I don't want my life to mean anything. Very few people think that way. And most people think, like, I want the world to be a little better because I was in it. And if craft beer can play a conduit role to help that, facilitate that, then we're on to something.
That's just wonderful.
Amen. Yep.
Yeah. Robert, we end every interview with a simple question, and that is, what do you wish Missoula was more well known for?
Man, at this point, I think the secret's out. Missoula is, on a lot of top 10 lists for a lot of things. Proximity to wilderness is amazing. Kind of the vibrant outdoor culture here, the craft beer scene. But honestly, as I prepare to depart this town, I wish that people knew more of the stories of the people in all the organizations here who are doing so many good things for the community. That, you'll read, and it's like, it's such a hip place, or, it's such a cool place, or like, oh, the skiing's awesome. And sure, all of that's true. But I wish that Missoula would be as well known for, or even more so, for being a hub where really good people are doing good things in this world.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Geez, this has just been such a wonderful discussion. Robert, thank you again so much for joining us, and thanks for supplying these awesome beers, and just thanks for sharing your thoughts on these things.
Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thanks so much, Brian and MC, for taking the time to have conversations like this. Even though I'm surrounded by people all the time, it's not a daily occurrence where you get to sit down and talk about the most important things with people. So I'm very grateful for your time.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you meeting me at the brewery when I visited Missoula, and appreciate you taking time to join us for the podcast. Shout out to you, MC. Thanks for co-hosting.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Yeah. Cheers to you both. You can find more from our featured brewery tonight, the wonderful Imagine Nation Brewing, at imaginationbrewing.com. As always, if you're digging the show, you can support us by signing up for the beer club at brewvana.com. As a member of the Brews Less Traveled Beer Club, you'll get a box of amazing local craft beers shipped directly to you monthly, and you'll get to drink those same beers with us, the same beers that we do, like these ones, right here on the stream. You could heckle me from the chat. I'm going to keep making that joke. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and on tap at Brewvana. We'll be back next week with a special episode to cap off the month. Yes, Beer Club subscribers, you should have one beer remaining. Hang on to that until next Wednesday. We do have one more special episode to cap off the month. And here's a teaser. Those that joined us for our 12 Beers of Christmas that were a fan of the New Year's Eve episode, we'll be pleasantly surprised by next week's episode. But until then, stay safe, be kind, and support your local breweries. Cheers, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for watching Brews Less Traveled on YouTube. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more interviews with brewery professionals.